Welcome to Igniting the Spark. I'm your host, Stephanie James. Listener, I'm so happy to have you here with us today. As always, just feeling into your heart. And when we actually pause and take a deep breath together, let's just do that together just for a moment. Just place a hand on your heart if you can, taking that nice deep breath into your heart space and just feeling that place where you are connected to yourself, to the divine, and that we are connected to each other in this place.
Mm.
Listener, I am so excited to have you here with us today. I am here with my beautiful friend, Darci Meyers. Darci is a poet, Buddhist chaplain, and somatic therapist living in the high mountain desert of southern Colorado. Shaped by nearly 15 years of working in hospice and palliative care, and by her own encounters with loss, she accompanies others through the landscapes of grief. She recently published her first book, The Marvelous Contentment of Belonging: Poetry, Prose, and Prompts for Navigating Grief. And following the death of her husband in 2022, she wrote this book, and I can't wait to speak with her about this and share this with you and just share this incredible being with you. Darcy's been a meditation practitioner for more than 35 years. Her writing is rooted in lived experience and in deep relationship with the wild, animate world of the San Luis Valley. Such a joy to have you here with us, Darcy.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's a great honor to be here to have this conversation with you.
This is such a joy. I feel like this conversation has been a long time in coming, just because just chatting with you as you were writing the book and knowing that you were in this process and just knowing this really important message, number one, that's so important that you're bringing to the world, and the
Mm,
lovely things that you're bringing through this book. Um, before we dive in, and I definitely wanna dive in, and I'm hoping that you'll share some of your poetry and prose with us. What got you interested in this work? Because you were in this work before the loss of your husband.
that's true. In fact, I first came to hospice work after the death of my mother, Kathy Meyers, and she died very young at age 56. She had cancer. She first had cancer actually when I was a teenager. She had breast cancer at the age of 39. And, as I age, I realize, wow, how young that was. And it really shaped me. I've had other many, many losses in my life, but that loss was really pivotal for me to lose a parent so young. And, I was in my early 30s. I was just kind of getting launched after finishing my graduate studies and suddenly found myself working in hospice and palliative care and really kind of grappling myself with, you know, what is loss? What is death? What does this all mean when we love so deeply and we hurt so much when that love is gone? And of course, I realized over time that love never leaves us. Grief is really a demonstration of that love. But that was the original impetus, actually, to start working in hospice and palliative care, and it just happened quite naturally. It wasn't something I was seeking. It was one of those divine nudges, let's say.
Yeah, yes. So beautiful. And from that experience, it's interesting how grief and loss breaks us open.
Mhm.
And it can really break our heart open, and in that openness is also these levels of expansion and
Yeah,
experience in a way we didn't know was possible.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as we're, traversing the landscape of grief, it can feel bewildering, disorienting. We go through so many emotions, anger and sadness and denial and all the things that accompany this thing. And, I certainly couldn't have imagined that there would be gifts in that process, but there are gifts. That expansion that you're talking about is so true. And I think about, the loss of my husband and how difficult it was for me, how life, in a sense, really stopped for me. And I just tended. Every day I was tending my grief. And what I can see now from the distance of about 3.5 years since he died is the gift that that gave me to really stop and tend to my inner world and tend to these tender places that are touched by loss, and to see that I actually can still love and I have this capacity for love and resiliency that I didn't actually know that I had. I might have said so intellectually, but being having it that experience from the inside is so different, and also has increased my capacity to hold space for others who are, going through this territory themselves. And I think in many ways, we're all going through it, whether it's the loss of a loved one or it's the loss of or anticipation of, global warming and what's happening in our environment. We were just talking before we started about the fires that are in Colorado and the smoke that we're experiencing, and that we're face to face in our world today with losses of all sorts, and being asked to meet those things with love, with compassion, with care, and certainly tenderness for ourselves as well as tenderness for others who are navigating similar things.
Well, and, you and I were having this conversation right before we jumped on as
Mm.
well. Sometimes it's a loss of things that are about us in our own experience, like our eyesight. We were
Yes.
both saying how, gosh, we gotta grab our glasses to be able to read things, and yet there is a sense of loss, and I think sometimes there is that sense of grieving maybe a certain vitality or a way that we showed up when we were 26, 36, 46, and as life continues. Um,
Mm,
and although we can really enjoy and be open to these beautiful new chapters unfolding, I think there's something so essential and honoring
mhm.
in acknowledging the grief of that loss.
I love that you say that because that's something we don't do well in our culture. We don't do goodbyes well. We don't do endings well. We don't have a lot of good cultural models for that. We don't certainly don't have good cultural models for aging, right? We're getting more online here, um, but it's something that we don't see well or see. Demonstrated for us in the world. And there are so many different kinds of losses. You just named some, like loss of capacity, loss of youth, loss of dreams. That's one of the things that showed up really for me in the loss of my husband is, losing the future him, losing our future, that vision of what that future was going to be together, that being gone. We lose people, we lose pets, we lose jobs, we move, even moves that are really positive and uplifting, we're still leaving something behind. And that leaving of something behind often doesn't get attention.
Mhm.
And that, I think, is we're missing the full kind of experience of life, the full tapestry of what it means to be human, to really walk side by side with joy and love and sorrow and loss and devastation, and to be able to hold both, to increase our capacity to hold both. There's so much richness in that that often is missed.
Yes. And I have to say, Darcy, I don't think I have ever met anyone who has walked through and held grief in
Mm.
the way that you have. I mean, what you have shared with me, and if
Mm.
you're willing to share some of that grief journey with the
Mhm.
listeners, is I think it's just so profound how you didn't do the spiritual bypass, how you didn't run away from the grief. I mean, honestly, I feel like there's tears coming to my eyes right now because of the profound way in which you leaned in
Mm.
and almost welcomed
Wow.
this. You held this in such a profound way.
Yeah. Thank you for that reflection. I feel those tears too. And I will tell you, it has not always been that way.
Yeah.
So, the first very significant loss that I had was my maternal grandmother when I was 26 in the mid 90s. And she was killed, she was murdered by a serial killer. And she disappeared from her home one night, and it took weeks for us to find her and understand what happened. And at that time, I was just ill-equipped. My entire family really was ill-equipped to understand, like, what is really happening here and how is this happening? How does this happen in the world? And in our world, maybe it happens to someone else, but it doesn't happen to us, so I did not know how to navigate that grief. I did the best that I could under the circumstance, but I remember feeling quite numb, confused, disoriented, and then I had to go right back to my life. I was in graduate school, I was buying a house, I was starting my life, and that stayed with me for many, many years because that was really unfinished loss. That was a grief that I didn't fully get to process. And over the years, I've had many losses. As I mentioned, my mother's loss came after that. My aunt, paternal aunt, died of lung cancer when she was 47. And she was a poet. Her name was Dana. She was also just this spitfire. She had so much life in her. And she was a young aunt. She was only, I think, maybe 15 years older than me, something. I can't remember exactly. Um, but we had a really deep, deep soul connection, she and I. And so that was another loss. And, all these losses began to kind of pile up in my, emotional life. And I also didn't get to fully grieve her at that time. Very soon after, a dear friend of mine committed suicide. I've had since then another friend commit suicide. Other friends die of cancer. We have a mutual friend who recently died of cancer. And when my husband was diagnosed, he had cancer as well. He had a very aggressive form of lymphoma. I just knew in that moment that this is only going to happen once, and I want to fully, fully be here. And I was fully present to his treatment. I mean, it's hard to imagine really, but we laughed, we joked, we had music playing in the hospital room. We had staff dancing with us in while he's in his hospital bed getting chemo. We really lived that experience fully. And when he died, that was my intention for grieving. I want to have this experience fully. I want to live through this grief because that the depth of this grief is a demonstration of the love that I have for him. And it felt like my world completely stopped, and it did, minus the little and people who have lost dear ones know of all the business you have to attend to when somebody dies,
Mm.
but other than that, I stopped working. I tended to my grief. I took that first year of loss to just be with this experience and get to know it from the inside, and that helped me to finish all that unfinished grief that wasn't quite metabolized in my system from all these losses. I had done a lot of work with them, but it hadn't been complete. And I feel, I mean, complete's a funny word when we're talking about grief because there's never a time those losses didn't happen, but they
Mm.
do become more integrated into our system. They become more part of this inner landscape of how we navigate the world with this awareness of the preciousness of this human life and the preciousness of our connections.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. I can see you all dancing.
Mm. Mm.
I can just see those moments, and I see the way in which you also you allowed yourself to say, "I didn't wanna miss a moment of that,
Mhm.
and I'm not going to rob myself of a moment
Yeah.
of this, of the aftermath," in quotes here, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. And that's something, we don't do, as I said before, we don't have cultural models for this. I don't know if you realize, but the typical bereavement leave in the United States is 3 days.
Dear God.
3 days. Can you imagine, losing your most beloved and you get 3 days off of work? You can't even plan a funeral in 3 days, let alone begin the monumental process of grieving. And so I really felt like I had the luxury really of being able to say, "I'm stopping. I'm tending this grief. This is what my life is now." And the truth of the matter, I didn't know how long it was gonna last.
Yeah.
That first year, I had false starts and stops. I'd think, "Well, maybe I can go back to seeing clients," and I'd try and I'd go, "Oh, no. Oh, no, this is not available to me yet." And the second year, I did start working again, not as much, because one of the things I discovered is how much Bob supported me. Right? In the little unseen ways in my life that allowed me to be present to all these people I was tending and in their grief and loss and trauma. And suddenly I was like, oh, I actually can't do this in the same way. There's another loss, right? One I had not even anticipated. And, slowly, slowly, I've been kind of returning to the land of the living, but those lessons are with me. They're in me now. And I have more attention to my internal needs. I know when I'm kind of reaching that capacity point in a more poignant way, it's more alive for me. And I'm still tending grief. It's not over. I'm certainly in a different place than those first months after he died, that first year, but it's still very much alive.
Yeah. I love to that sense of tending to our grief.
Mhm,
It's so powerful. We're not shoving it down. We're not doing something to distract ourselves. We're tending to
mhm.
that inner garden, that inner experience of this.
Yeah.
And I wanna go back too to something that you said that I feel like is so important for people to really get, and it's this idea of, th somehow that grief is something that we can actually, these are my words,
Mhm,
embrace, that we don't have to rush,
mhm,
that even if we don't have models or we don't have the script, that we can be present to.
mhm, mhm,
And I guess in that is a question of, in your experience, Darcy, how did you continue to allow yourself to show up for that and tend to that? Because one of the things you said that really, um, is so true in my experience, and I think people, again, need to hear, is that oftentimes when we haven't grieved those things from the past and we have a major loss like this, all of those, perhaps
mhm.
unwelcomed visitors show up at our door again.
They
So,
do.
yeah, so I know I just kind of gave you a lot, but yeah, if
Yeah,
you could address some of that in your own
yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, as I wrote in the book, all of our present losses bring all of our past losses into, clearly into focus. They're here with us. And let's see, I'm going to pause for a second because I lost the thread of your question. Can you say it again?
Yes.
The
So
main
so
point?
yeah, so the question is around, how do we create room, or how do we
That's
allow
it.
ourselves to be present with that grief that actually might feel very overwhelming, because it's not just maybe the singular experience. A better, concise question would have been to put these two things together and say, yes, when we've not maybe dealt with certain losses and now loss comes knocking at our door, how do we open them up and, like Rumi says, greet them at the door laughing and
Mhm.
welcome them in? Not that we're laughing by any means, but that's the line from the guest house. How do
Right.
we open them up and say, "Yeah, this is what's here.
Yeah.
I'm present with this."
The main thing for me was time, right? Allowing myself to out and allowing life to be paused, to say, I'm pausing on all these external demands and circumstances so I can tend this place. I spent a lot of time alone. There were days that I was on the couch where I thought, there was one time in particular, I remember it really clearly. And this was a place that Bob used to always read, on the couch. He was an avid reader. And I wanted just to be in that place where he had been, and would lay on the couch for hours sometimes. And there was a moment I thought, "I'm depressed." And I thought, you know what? If I am, it's okay because I'm grieving and I'm going to stay on the couch until I'm ready to get off the couch.
Mm.
And at some point, I was ready to get off the couch. But that was a really important time for me to just be with the reality of the impact of this loss. It was very somatic. It didn't have a lot of words, it had a lot more feelings. My body was very active. But I did find if I could sit with it and be curious, then I could meet the grief. I could meet the experience as it was unfolding moment to moment. And I think this is where meditation practice was really helpful for me, is I just sat with it. I sat with it with curiosity and allowed the grief to speak. Like, what wants to happen through me here? And
Yeah.
allowing not what my head thought should happen, but more of like, what is the thing that is unfolding within me? And I wrote. I wrote through the tears. I wrote through the ruin. I wrote through the devastation. And that kept me very close to that experience of loss. What is this for me? What is it that I am greeting and meeting and tending in this moment? And I know not everybody, has the ability to put a pause on life, and do this
Yeah.
work, but
Yeah.
we can do it in small ways. We can carve out an evening where we just sit with the reality of our losses. We can be curious about those losses. We can engage with them creatively, like I did with poetry. We could paint with them. We can work with clay. We can go for a walk. I did a lot of walking. I live in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of open space around me. And the animate world here, this wild, feral place that I live in, supported me so well in the grief because I was paying attention to, like, what is the sun doing right now? And, he died on very close to the winter solstice in 2022. And it was deep in the darkness of winter. I was in the dark, cold. What is it that this winter is helping me to understand about grief? The kind of desolation of winter really matched the desolation I felt inside. And as I started to see the sun rising earlier, right, and setting later, and I could feel the energy of life underground wanting to come forward into spring, into new life. And it's like, how do I feel? Do I have that sense of new life in me? And I didn't actually. And I was saying, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for the sun. I'm not ready for the warmer weather calling me outside. I want to stay here. I want to stay with this. I wasn't ready. And I watched myself through summer, still not being ready, and through fall. And something started to happen in the autumn where the leaves were dropping. And I was saying, yes, this is what I feel. I feel this letting go is still happening in me. This really preparing for the darkness again, it's still here. And it went back into that second winter with that awareness. And by the time the second spring came along, I was starting to feel a little more ready. Like, oh, yeah, I'm actually feeling excited about the warming of the weather. I want to go outside and play in the garden and, tend to the plants and just was having the time to be in relationship. The title of the book, The Marvelous Contentment of Belonging, right? Those are words that Bob said to me the morning he died and was so much encapsulated our love, our relationship, and encapsulated the grief. I kept coming back to that, like, what do I belong to now? Where do I belong? And I could feel this sense of, I belong in this grief. The grief belongs to me. I belong in this winter time when it's dark. I belong to the energy of spring coming forward. And I began to have a different sense of belonging. And that sense has really stuck with me, that there's support, there's love in the animate world. and also in my dear ones that supported me. I wasn't alone in it either. I
Yeah.
had a lot of times where I had friends show up, a text emoji just show up right at the right time when I did it, or a poem somebody sent me because they were thinking about me, or a girlfriend who dropped a meal off knowing that I probably wasn't cooking for myself. And there was so much love and support. And I could feel it. That was part of the tending, is the receiving of the support that was available in ways that I were unexpected.
Gosh, so beautiful, Darcy. And I want to move to this beautiful
Mhm.
book that was a part of
Mhm.
that process, this beautiful title that you just spoke, The Marvelous Contentment of Belonging. And I'm wondering, to in a way introduce this book. Is there
Mm.
something that comes to your heart? I know you have some memorized and some maybe that you would read,
Mhm.
but is there something that right now
Mm.
feels like, "Okay,
Yeah, thank you
this
for
is ready
asking.
to come forth." Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Um, there's so many poems in this book that are about the raw experience of loss, that kind of wild, untamed place of grief. There are poems of hope, like what happens when we can really allow ourselves to let go into something bigger than ourselves. And that certainly was a experience of my grief, that as the more and more I could let go into this experience of loss, the more that I found my ground, the more that I realized there's so much more holding me here than I ever knew, even though I had many, many glimpses throughout my life and many spiritual experiences. There was something magical at being at this threshold. So this poem is called The Returning, and it's a short one, so I'll read it to you now. Things unfold perfectly as they are. You are being undone and done again. You are not the doing. The practice is to allow the undoing over and over again. It is all about the returning. And grief does this to us. We are being undone and done again. And what we return to, and what my experience was, what we return to is love. Because we don't grieve unless we love, unless we care, unless something or someone is important to us.
So beautiful, that's it. I mean, that's it. It's the
Mhm.
return to love, and as we were speaking about the gifts of this, and really the gift of taking this journey, of
Mm.
allowing ourselves to be fully present to this journey, is that what is returned to us is so much more than it sounds like in your experience too, and for myself, than we ever could have anticipated. It broadens us and gives us a depth of love that in some ways is so much deeper, and the word expansive is what keeps coming to my mind, but it's so much more expansive than
Mhm.
perhaps what we had experienced or imagined ahead of time. I mean, what a
Yeah.
gift. What a
Yeah.
gift to have your heart opened to that place.
Mhm. Mhm. There's another poem this is
Yep, I
reminding me
felt
of.
I felt it coming through. Yeah, I
As
wanna
you were
hear it.
saying it, I'm like, "Oh
Yes,
boy, your
please.
words are igniting my words," and of course, I have to
Yes,
put the
please.
glasses on and find it here. So, um, hmm,
And this is the beauty of what we do, that
yeah,
we ignite these sparks in one another.
that's right. That's right. What you're talking about really, and my experience of this time has been, tending grief and also feeling like I'm in an apprenticeship to grief. That
Mhm.
grief is teaching me something about life and about love. And this poem is called Apprenticeship of Grief. And I'll put my glasses on because I can't see it all. There's a word in here called somatic. I just want to define that.
Yes.
Somatic is a astronomical, astrological term that is. explaining when two celestial bodies are together in the cosmos. They're in a kind of cosmic dance with one another, and that's the Somatic cycle that they're in.
Beautiful.
In this Somatic eloquence of love, there is a limbic resonance, a reverberation that softly announces life, sings disputations against sorrow as joy bids its return to the trees. Slowly, gravity releases the sun, now rising higher into the late winter sky, while your distant voice sings color into the darkness. I try softer in the delicate wandering mist of morning. There are no enemies inside, just the remembrance of stars kindled by that distant song. This apprenticeship of grief stretches a life wide open, then coaxes into good humor gradually over time as the beckoning sun ascends, welcoming me home again and again. Mm.
Full Richter scale goosebumps.
Mm.
There's no words for me to even respond, Darcy. It
Mm.
resonates at such a beautiful, deep level.
Thank
What
you. And that is
gift.
certainly my hope that this resonate with others because we've all experienced loss, right? We have different circumstances, different types of relationships. We are different people, but this is a common thread that touches all of our lives. And my hope really with this book is that it can help everyone who touches it digest and metabolize their own losses and find ways through creative writing potentially to or other creative pursuits to bring that loss into love, to help to metabolize it, to stretch our life wide open, that expansion that you're talking about. And there are some prompts at the end of the book for each of the seasons of grief to help people to start to explore that for themselves. And I actually just received a gift from a friend yesterday who is going through her own type of loss, a divorce, which is also a big loss for people. And she read a poem and she wrote her own poem about this loss. And she just said, "Thank you so much. I've never written anything. And this was so healing for me to be able to put my experience creatively, into form and to have words on the page." And it just touched me so deeply. I also have a course that I'm offering that's a companion to the book. It's called Tending Grief. It will start this fall, and it's a live virtual um, program basically of exploring grief in this deep way to make space in our lives to tend our individual losses. So we'll be doing, reading poetry together, sharing our experiences, developing community, doing ritual, doing writing, doing meditation to make space for exploring loss. Mhm.
This is just it, Darcy. I mean, the beautiful gift of you and these offerings, um,
Mhm.
you're a way shower. You are helping to guide us into this experience that we don't have, right? As a collective culture, we don't have these models. And so even in your poems, one of the things that strikes me, and as I've read through your book, it gives us words. It helps us articulate the whisperings of the soul that are within us that we can't always articulate. And when we find those words, it's like finding a fine piece of music.
Mhm.
And that resonance and that ability that I feel like, I mean, those are these little bitty what I'm getting are like these molecules of light that start moving through us that are
Mhm.
it's like this healing balm, your words,
That's
and
right.
then an opportunity
Mhm.
to explore this and to come together with you in a group. And I just this book is so beautiful. Is there first of all, um is there a place that people can get this book? I want people to be able to find you, find the book.
Yes.
Where can people find this?
Basically, on all online retailers, Amazon and Barnes& and Noble, and it's available in all brick and mortar bookstores, but may have to be requested, and it's available on my website, darcimeyers.com. People can go and buy it there directly if they would like.
And Darcy
Mm.
with an I,
That's right, Darci, and Myers is Meyers. There are multiple spellings, so
right?
darcimeyers.com.
Beautiful, and
Yeah.
people can find out about the event then?
That's right. So all of the program details are on my website. All of my offerings are there. And I'm also available to speak to groups and people who might be interested in exploring this topic more for themselves. And I really appreciate your reflections, to hear the impact that it's having and also just to feel our resonance because I know you've experienced the losses as well and have certainly written about them very inspiringly. And I feel like we're kind of kindred spirits here walking this path together.
Indeed, indeed, and
Hmm.
and and what a beautiful I guess I before we wrap up the show, I think something beautiful that we did share is really this walking and at times literally almost hand in hand grief journey, losing our dear friend Jane.
That's right.
And, I just wanna share with the listeners, I mean, one of the profound moments was this day that both Darcy and I and those closest to Jane knew she was dying. We knew she was passing and that by that evening, she would no longer be with us. And Darcy and I spent more than 4 hours together sitting by my fireplace, just having this beautiful I mean, I can't even begin to articulate that conversation and that connection, and then
Mm,
the fact in midst of that, Jane calls us, and it was like
that's right.
Jane brought us together into each other's lives, and it was
It
almost
did.
like she was saying, "Okay, the 3 of us are together here as I'm walking home."
That's right. Yeah, and what a gift. I have so much gratitude for her. She was such a dear one and such a brilliant heart who loved so deeply, and I'll be eternally grateful to her for many things, but one is for introducing me to you and, knowing that we're deeply connected always, and this is the beauty of grief, right? We can through our grieving, through our shared grieving, particularly when we get to grieve in community, which doesn't get to happen often, it keeps those relationships alive. It keeps us connected to our beloveds. The relationship changes, but the connection can just deepen over time. And I certainly feel that with Bob. I don't feel like, yes, he's not here and my life is very, very different, but I don't feel like that connection is gone. That connection is with me and will be carried with me through my entire life. I still talk to him. I still feel that support from him. It's just different.
Yes, yes, and Darcy, I have to tell you this because just 2 nights ago, Jane came to me in a dream, and I haven't had her come to me since the night after she died. And how interesting that I was welcoming her into this big room. It was this really big room with a very, very round, large table. And so in the events that I've done, as you know, there's this important piece to have these lights, we've called them lights of the round table in my films where people sit around these tables and it's a place to be authentic and real and of
Mm,
wise counsel.
yes,
And Jane begins to walk into the doorway and sees the table and turns back towards me with that big, beautiful smile of hers and says to me, "I'm here. I'm always here." Like,
that's
just
it.
like this beautiful, just, I'm always available and I am always here. I'm already at the table.
That's right. And that is such a beautiful recognition, right? I love that that happened for you, that she came to you in that way. And I think it's so important for all of us to hear that, this connection with our beloveds doesn't go away and
Yeah.
can actually deepen over time. It's just different, but it
Yes.
opens the possibility to seeing that we are never alone here. we are connected to something so much bigger that we know a fraction of, and to trust in this process of living and grieving and dying that we are being held by something bigger. And that's such a beautiful example of that.
Thank you. I mean, that
Yeah.
this is it, and this is, Darcy, too, where you and I and what we bring to the world, I think, dovetails so beautifully.
Mhm.
And truly our experiences of death and loss and end not being the, in quotes, "end," but
Mhm.
just being these next chapters in our books
Yeah,
of eternity.
that's right. And learning to live at these thresholds of uncertainty. There are so many thresholds that we're always standing on. And in that threshold is an opportunity and an
And
invitation.
yes, yes, and of course, as a psychotherapist, right away, my mind's going to, "Oh my god, of course, we love thriving, our brain loves predictability, it loves certainty." And so what a
Mhm.
beautiful, it's like I get the sense of standing on the edge of this beautiful cliff, and you're seeing the sunset, and it's just everything is magnificent, and it's like, "Do I trust that I can fly? Do I trust that I can be held?" And not that we're gonna jump off the cliff by any means, but
Mhm.
in a metaphorical way of, like,
Mm.
can we trust this moment, whatever this is, to unfold for us, and know that
Yes.
that's actually what's happening, that life is not being done to us,
Yeah,
that this experience, this beautiful, rich, gorgeous life is happening for us if we can be present
that's
to
right.
the unfolding.
That's right. That's beautifully said. And this is why we need community, a show like, a program like this and people having these conversations, because we need to remind one another that this is possible. Mm.
Love that, love that. Oh, Darcy, you and I could talk all day, and I love doing that with you.
And we
I can't
will.
wait to continue the conversation for this episode. So, what
Mhm.
is an essential message for you that comes to the
Mm.
heart right now that you want to leave with the listeners?
Yeah. Well, I always say in my practice too with clients that my bias, and it has been proven to be true time and time again, is that we all have our own inner healing intelligence. We all have wisdom within us that knows how to bring us to wholeness. And our job is to listen, to pay attention, to get quiet long enough that we can tap into that wisdom, even when it hurts, or maybe even especially when it hurts, and see what wants to happen through us, what life wants to be lived through us, and to trust it. Because this is not the gift of the mystic. This is not some, spiritual person that has access to it. It is each of us. And grief has certainly taught me more and more, not that I ever do it perfectly by any means, but to trust that impulse within me, that impulse that we all have toward love, toward healing, toward wholeness. So, my wish is that everybody can recognize that movement, that impulse toward wholeness within them.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you,
Mm.
Darcy. Thank you for
Thank
shining your
you.
beautiful light and sharing all this, just your beautiful words, your beautiful heart, and of course, your beautiful
Thank
spark
you.
with all of
Thank you
us.
so much. And thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to many more of these conversations.